to a Patreon episode of the Comedy Film Funnel. My name is Susan Tekla-Kruglenska, and thanks for being back here. So, of course, I just recently did an episode that was Team America World Police, had a fill-in co-host, Corey Powell, and I cannot thank him enough. He was amazing. But I'm back here on Patreon. Joe has got his book in. He handed the damn thing in. And so he is here with us for a little follow-up visit so we can talk about Team America, South Park, and just sort of see what's going on. What's Joe?
I have returned.
Joe's returned. Did you die? Are you okay? Holy cow.
I have returned like Gandalf. I am now Joe Dater the White. I know that means nothing to you because you don't care about or understand Lord of the Rings.
No, I don't.
Much to your great detriment.
That was pointed out to me by a certain co-host geek nerd, what Lord of the Rings person who knows what's the difference between those four movies.
The difference between Gandalf the Grey and Gandalf the White.
Were there 3 or 4 movies? I don't even know.
There's 3 movies and there's 3 books. It makes sense.
Right.
There's 3 other movies
books
that you can ignore comfortably.
Oh, and there's The Hobbit,
Yes.
though. I don't know. I know there was The Hobbit.
Don't bother with those.
Okay.
There's nothing there. But this is the kind of gag where you take a thing from pop culture, especially nerdy pop culture, and just lift it out and transfer it to your characters that you might see on a little show called South Park.
Yeah.
This is exactly the kind of gag you'd see on a little show called South Park. In fact, I think they did this exact gag on the Fellowship of the Return of the Towers of the King episode from, I think it was 2002.
That's an episode I would not particularly remember.
No.
I know. I remember the Star Wars references. So you got to give me that. There was 2 Star Wars references in Team America. Did you know that?
There's the sort of cantina scene. Even some of the creatures in there are the same as the cantina. There's one character in the Star Wars cantina who's sort of like wearing a gas mask.
Yeah.
That's in Team America. And then there's, of course, the Luke coming into Jabba's palace at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, which is parodied in that. So why was I absent for the episode?
You were absent because you were freaking the F out.
That's true. I was writing my book and I thought the effort would kill me, and it did. Here I am.
Clearly.
I have returned, though.
I'm so sorry.
No,
good.
because I have returned in a different form. I am in a more beatific form. I am more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Mixing up my references there a little bit. Susan.
And did you notice Corey showing up? Because I forgot to mention to him. So I gave him permission to use your apartment for the last.
Yeah, I have a little issue with that because I wasn't away from my apartment.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that to him, that you would probably be there working on your book. I failed to mention that.
I actually needed privacy to work on my book. Yeah, I have a little bit of a problem with that, with you giving away access to my apartment without my permission.
Well, I had to entice him. This was a big job. These were big shoes to fill in. And, it's a lot of work. I mean, it's like 2 hours.
I want to discuss Corey's performance in my place. I really enjoyed the episode. I thought it was really great, actually. You guys had a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, it was pretty dicey.
Yeah,
I mean, that was dicey. That was dicey. It was, when I was editing it, I was a little nervous, to tell you the truth. Because it's very easy for people to get very upset about you talking about certain subject matter. And this is stuff where you have to we don't have to cover it, but I think we should, I think we should talk about this stuff. So,
yeah, and I think so. And I don't know why I said I didn't want to cover that movie, because in retrospect, listening to the episode, I rewatched the movie and it's pretty fucking great.
Yeah.
I kind of love it, actually.
When I rewatched it, though, I really was thinking, I actually wrote to Corey and I said, are you sure you want to do this? Because it is really dicey. Like, I was thinking maybe we should do bigger, longer, uncut, because that's actually less controversial because it's more about censorship. And, this is really political. Yeah. Again, the Film Actors Guild acronym, which I want to make clear, this is not a good thing. But, there was actually a lot more to parse as far as like, what kind of jokes you could stand up for and not stand up for in Team America than even in Bigger, Longer, Uncut.
Yeah, I think you walked that line really well. And I have more of an appreciation of the film after having listened to that than I think I did before. And we're going to talk about how over the years my my feelings towards Matt and Trey have wavered. They've gone from good to bad and back. Let me do a quick little makeover though, so that I look more like a normal person.
While you're doing that, let me just mention, there's always things that I think afterwards I wish I had mentioned, during these episodes. So one of them is, it's really fun to look up on YouTube some of the stuff that the Andersons did before Thunderbirds. They actually had several marionette shows before Thunderbirds. I didn't realize that till this year. And some of them were in black and white. That's how old they were. They were from the 50s and that kind of thing. And they're super spooky looking marionette. Some of them are really creepy looking. There's only little, snippets of them here and there. So anyway, I just wanted to tip our viewers off to, just checking that out because it's pretty fun to look that stuff up.
I have to bring up one of the things you didn't bring up on the show is that, which ties in very nicely with our first episode, Bedazzled, is the beautiful parody of the Jerry Anderson marionette shows that Peter Cook and Dudley Moore did on their sketch show on Not Only But Also.
Johnny.
Yes, Pop?
Your strings are showing.
Well, I've been putting on a bit of weight recently.
And it was called Super Thundersting Car,
yeah,
which was an amalgamation of all of the Jerry Anderson shows. Supercar, Thunderbirds, I think the other one was called Stingray, maybe. And they mashed it all together into like a Mad Magazine parody. And they did it all live with them in great makeup and costumes to look like the puppets and sort of acting like marionettes. And they did it so beautifully. And when Dudley Moore walks into a room as a marionette, sort of carrying himself with those sort of loose legs that don't really touch the ground, it's kind of amazing because you believe he's a marionette. He's just doing it with his body. It's incredible performance. And then he looks just like the puppet.
And then there was one other tie-in you mentioned, which was from the second episode of the show.
Yeah, with our second episode was Cabin Boy, which includes a hilariously big prop of toenail clippers that Mike Starr tries to use on Chris Elliott. And we mentioned in the show what a great prop it was. And then in Team America, they have the puppets wearing normal size toenail clippers on their belts as some sort of weapon or equipment or whatever that now looks huge on them. And I thought how nicely that ties in. And I was listening at home and thinking, oh, it's funny they didn't mention that. Well, this is what happens when you do a show without me.
I know. I didn't think I did think of it afterwards. I honestly did.
I was secretly hoping I'd come back and there'd be no show. It would crash and burn in flames without me.
Really canceled. We could still. I just posted it yesterday as of this recording. We'll see how fast I can edit this. So we can still be canceled. Believe me. Anyway, let's talk about South Park.
Sure.
Tell me your personal South Park story. How did you do you remember when you first started watching it and what you thought of it and all that stuff?
Yeah, I remember I didn't like it.
Really?
Yeah, it was a sound I hadn't heard before in comedy. It was a new tone for comedy. And I had a very bad reaction to it at first. At the time I was into a lot of old comedy and my ears were not acclimated to a younger style of comedy. And
was this way at the beginning?
Yes, exactly at the beginning, 97. I was put off by it. It felt mean. It felt very mean-spirited to me in a way that I hadn't grown used to before. They came out around the same time as Mr. Marshall Mathers became popular. Eminem and his first song came out, and I thought they sort of were similar. It was this weird tone that I thought, is this the next generation's version of what's funny? And it didn't sit well on my brain at all. It just felt scary and dangerous and upsetting. And then, of course, I remembered this must have been how the older generation responded to Monty Python in the 60s or to Saturday Night Live in the 70s. It was more than just that they didn't think it was funny. It was that they thought it was scary and dangerous and weird and destructive. And in some way, because that was the reaction I was having to it. It was just a different generation's jokes. It was a different generation's comedy. With Trey Parker, there's always a lot of name calling. There's always this, very vulgar language. And it occurred to me, I'm just being like the older generation. Saying,
you were in your 20s though.
I was in my 20s, but I was in my, I was 32. I was 32. And so I thought, this is the next generation coming up with their form of comedy. And And then I realized I just opened my mind to it a little bit more. And eventually I just grew to love it. And then in a very short time, I became the biggest fan, and I was obsessed with South Park, and I absolutely loved it. Once I acclimated myself to this new tone, and then I thought, oh, these guys are just, here's what I'm scared of. They're way funnier than anything that I've been doing. Because I was at the time doing cartoons and stuff, and I was like, oh, wait, my brain is tuned into a very rigid set of definitions of what can be funny, and they've just like blown that up, and that's what I'm responding to. I'm responding to the shock of it. The culture shock of it.
Yeah. It's worth noting that they themselves have said on the record, it's seemingly a few times, that they regret the first 3 seasons. They don't find it funny. Although I'm really surprised about that myself, because I think that there's some real moments and treasures in the first 3 seasons that I can't even imagine.
Absolutely. And that was when
but they do feel like, Trey Parker's actually said, I don't know why I found some of that funny, but it did over time. It certainly got into a rhythm. Certainly by the 4th season, it is pretty clear that by the 4th season and by the 8th season, they were really in a groove. Like by the 8th season, they were like, really, yeah.
I felt when I first heard it, the tone of it was just too rough and tumble for me. It was,
it was very random.
It literally scared me. It scared me.
Well, the first season especially was really random. I mean, that was kind of what I think is a little bit cool about it. It was so random what they would just throw in there. These creatures they'd come up with, these storylines. They were so like.
But that wasn't what I didn't like about it. It was more the meanness.
Yeah, well, that I always didn't like. Even though at the same time, I do like there are violent bits that I find really funny. Like I had put in that Team America video, Butters and the dance contest, the tap dancing contest. And you literally see a guy stuffing his organs back in his body, cartoon version. And, I actually put that in. That was not an exact sequence. I edited that in it because that's the funniest scene from that little segment. And, it's so sick, but I do find that really funny, even though that's really cruel and horrible and violent. That there are moments that I like that I think that they do to great effect. But in general, obviously I'm, like I said on the show, I'm not into the gross out humor, and I don't like the meanness. Here's one thing I wanted to say. They're, and I hate to be sexist, but they're so full of Trey Parker. His kind of humor is so full of testosterone. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of part of it. Now I know when he said when he was a kid, he was the kind of guy who would beat up the other kids. And I kind of joked that I had a crush on him, but he would have hated me when I was a kid. We would have hated each other. He would have picked on me or not even gave me the time of day because he was that kind of kid. He was the bully. He was picking on other kids. And you can kind of see that.
If only they knew he loved show tunes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But that's kind of, you can see that in him. There's a really, really super mean side to him. That's a little bit scary. That I think is actually a little bit scary and disturbing.
I had a very bad reaction to it at first.
Yeah.
And it was definitely there.
And then let me just say quickly too, I'm sorry, but that Tess says that he's grown up a lot and he feels he's not, really like that anymore. He admits that he was way too mean, and that he matured and he now has a kid. A lot of these guys, I have a daughter now, so I understand that rape jokes aren't that funny, that kind of thing. He has done that. He has pulled that kind of thing, but I believe it.
I think people say that.
I think people do mature. You do grow out of these things.
I can't do rape jokes because I have a daughter now. What if you'd had a son?
Right, yeah, as if men don't get raped, right?
No, but it's a stupid thing to say, like, oh, now I care about women because I have a daughter. It's
right.
insane.
Yeah, no, it's really horrible. It's really annoying. I'm not saying he said that specifically. I'm just saying he said he kind of, he got into that territory like, well, I have a family now, so I'm kind of
I recently got a kitten, so I am now very anti eating kittens.
Yes.
I'll tell you when they won me over. Barbra Streisand.
Oh, really? See, now that is pretty cruel.
I had no problem being mean to her of all people. So I think that was it. I had no problem being mean to her of all people, but also the episode was so smart and clever. And the fact that because I'm a big Toho fan. Yeah. I love Godzilla movies and I love the old school Godzilla movies. And so the fact that they made Barbra Streisand into a giant mecha monster like Mecha Godzilla, and they used all the cliches of the Toho kaiju movies, and then that they brought in that the cure for Barbra Streisand was Robert Smith of The Cure. That won me over. That was the moment at which I got it. And I was like, okay, I think I love this now.
See, my love of the first, the first season for me, it would be the Damien episode, which is Jesus fighting Satan. And there's, some Damien character, the obvious Antichrist. But it's one of the more coherent episodes. And, there's just a great story. I miss that they don't use Jesus as much as they used to. I loved the Jesus character. Remember, he had originally a cable access show, Jesus and Pals. That was really, I loved that. And I love that they made him such a normal guy, and he had such a reasonable voice. Even his voice was obviously just like the voice of reason. They actually made him sound normal, as opposed to whenever they have a really, like a Mel Gibson or a Saddam Hussein, they make their voices crazy. But Jesus had this very, very sane voice, and he loved the kids.
He was very calm. Look upon me, gaze upon me, and ye shall be saved.
A lot of people have wondered what my stance on homosexuality is. So I'd like to state once and for all my true opinion. You see,
that's all the time we've left for Jesus and Pals. Now stay tuned for Marty's movie reviews.
And it was clear that they had complete respect for him as a character, and I thought that was really sweet. But at the same time, would riff off of him in a negative way too, if they wanted to. But all the time, with some respect. Anyway, but that's a very clever episode that has it's a really well written episode where there's a really clever conclusion, that you don't quite expect, and it all comes together. And it was when, to me, that was a good evidence that, that they could really tell a story. Then they had these crazy random things where that was like a monster with Patrick Duffy as a leg. And it was like, what, just random weird stuff. But that was kind of magical too.
I guess they won me over eventually it wasn't too hard, because I was, of course, a Python devotee. And I found out much later that was their primary influence was Python.
That's what they first bonded on when they met in college. Yeah.
I saw Matt and Trey in an interview, and they said something very, very surprising to me. They said their primary influence was one specific Python sketch, and it was Confuse a Cat.
Oh, God, I love that sketch. That is actually my favorite Monty Python sketch.
It's great, but it wasn't what I would have thought would have been, the Rosetta Stone of South Park. But they explained it. They said, there's all this crazy stuff going on. They keep cutting back to the cat just sitting there silently, still. And then they show that Python's doing this crazy stuff, and then they cut back to the cat.
Confuse the cat.
And when you know that, you understand it, because they do that all the time on South Park. They cut back to someone just deadpan, blank, not reacting, and it's hilarious. It's like finding the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now you understand where they get that from.
So the concept of that sketch is the cat's kind of lost its vigor for life, and I forget a little bit, but the owners of the cats are like, "What's wrong with our cat? It won't do anything. It's just sitting there." And so they call Confuse a Cat, and they set up this whole stage in their yard, and they start performing for this cat these crazy, absurd things. And the cat is just and the whole
confuse it.
The whole point is to sort of to snap the cat out of its zen-like state. And but again, it's like the people running that business. It's an absurd business, but it's these adults that that have this crazy idea of how to fix this cat. It reflects the adults, what they're always constantly doing in South Park. Their ways of solving problems are always absurd. Part of their whole mission is to show the absurdity of how normal people are trying to solve problems.
Also, at the end of Confuse a Cat, they show you all of the other businesses that are affiliated with Confuse a Cat. And one of them is called Bewilder Beast.
Yeah, of course.
Which I can never get that out of my head. Bewilder Beast. I liked what you said there, because it reminds me of one of the things I loved about South Park. When I started to really enjoy it, was I realized that they seemed to have a rule, which is that this is the world from the point of view of an 8-year-old. And so every adult around them is one of two things: stupid or crazy. Mm-hmm. And you could clock it. Other than Chef, who was the only adult that the kids could trust, every adult was either stupid or crazy, or a combination of the two. And that pretty much is the world to an 8-year-old. You are starting to understand the world. You are just getting a little bit more acclimated, and you're looking around and realizing these people are idiots.
Yeah.
They're insane. My parents, my teachers, all these authority figures, they don't make any sense.
What do you think of their controversial take on things. The people, there's this whole thing where that people say, well, it's Matt and Trey are responsible for the alt-right. There's people have actually kind of suggested that they'd have had a bad influence on young people because they
There's
delved
an argument
into
that
territory that was,
they gave rise to this kind of internet nihilism, which is, the sort of thing where you post something that you care passionately about and someone responds to it with a laughing meme that says, why you mad, bro? Yeah.
Trolling.
That sort of
Yeah.
thing.
They kind of, a lot of people blame them for the concept of trolling. Yeah.
Yeah. And
or the normalizing of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that may be the case. I initially loved them because they were so nonpartisan, because they made fun of everybody and everything, because I, for the longest time, had this very, very strongly held belief that comedy cannot be advocacy. A true satirist and a true comedian must be an anarchist. You must not take sides ever, because if you take sides, then you're an advocate, not a comedian. And if you're trying to push a point of view or a cause one way or another, in one direction or another, then that's not true comedy. And so one of the things I loved about them was that they did that. They were across the board criticizing everyone. Everyone on both sides is bad. Not bad, but equally worthy of satire and criticism. And they were nonpartisan about it. They were unilateral. And I thought that was appropriate. Again, I've always said this: comedy cannot be advocacy. The only point of view you can push forward with comedy is we are all equally flawed.
I mean, you could say that should be the rule, but that's not how it pans out. You can say you think that's the way it should be, but that's not the way it is.
Well, here's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
That all changed with Trump.
Well,
because for me, it changed dramatically with the rise of this dangerous extreme right movement coming up in America, aided by Fox News and eventually culminating in Trump, and probably still on its way to do something. Because that was when I realized we have this incredibly destructive thing coming, this thing that is akin to the rise of Nazism, fascism in Europe. And it is no longer appropriate to hold both sides up to ridicule, because what we're in now with this highly destructive extreme right movement is a war. We're in a cultural war right now. And when you're in a war, you can't say, I'm not going to take sides. In a war situation, to not take sides is to take a side. And so for the longest time, I felt very much out of favor with Matt and Trey, because I felt that by steadfastly refusing to take sides and unilaterally making fun of everything, they were taking a side that was sympathetic with the right. And so I very much found I had a pretty bad taste in my mouth about them. And I kind of still do, because I think we're still in this fight, but they do hate Trump. It's true.
They could not have slammed him harder. They could not have possibly slammed Trump harder throughout the last 4 years. I mean, they completely humiliated him in every possible way they could. They did.
I think it's one of the reasons I was reluctant to cover Team America on our podcast, because I had just felt that their style of humor, which was to unilaterally ridicule the right and the left, was not that it was bad, not that it was not right, but that it was no longer appropriate for the situation this country is currently in.
Yeah, but I mean, that film came out in 2004. So here's the point I'd like to make is within an episode, they will zigzag so hard you'll get whiplash, as far as their take on things.
But
they said, really zigzag.
Yeah.
But by the end point, sometimes they have come to a conclusion. And what's really funny is I've noticed that people who've criticized them sometimes criticize them, even though at the end of the episode, they've made the opposite point to what they're being criticized for. Like they're supporting your side, but you just didn't notice it, because they were also pointing out the other angles. You know what I mean? So I think there's a little bit of an unfair criticism of them, where people are like, oh, they're anti-trans. And it's like, no, they really are digging into the subject matter with nuance. And they're often coming to conclusions, like Cartman in the bathroom episode, they come to the conclusion where it's like, nobody should care what bathroom anybody wants to use. But people still point to that episode and say, they're anti people using the bathroom, and they actually miss the entire point.
Yeah.
Because they have raised all of the different sides for the viewer to give them food for thought. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
I think they can be a little dangerous. I think they have, gotten into dangerous territory. They can be a little destructive. I was talking about constructive and destructive humor. I think they have been destructive in a lot of ways, but altogether, what they're doing is really setting up food for thought. They really, Trey is just a thinker. He really is. He's really thinking about every angle, which I don't think most people are, frankly. And I think comedians or artists or people writing for television, writing for movies who are making points, I don't think are thinking nearly as hard as Trey Parker is about a lot of these issues, and with the nuance that he is. So I have to say, as far as like philosophically, I really respect him. And I think because of the nuance, he gets punched. I think people are used to getting their message as a softball, as a big softball to the face.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. The difference is that these guys are very, very smart. And Trey and Matt, and from what I understand, Matt doesn't so much do the writing as just is there for Trey to bounce off of, and he's his best collaborator in that sense. I think they have a very when it comes to writing, a sort of a Cook and Moore dynamic there, whereas Dudley never really wrote, but Cook wrote better with him to bounce off of. I think that's true. And I think it's a very similar dynamic. It's like that, my favorite Chris Rock joke. I don't know what Oates does, but Hall never had a hit record without him.
I cut that out. You had said that during the Bedazzled episode. I thought that was a little too unfair to Dudley Moore. I really did.
Well, I think it's true of Matt and Trey, though.
Yeah, okay.
I really do. And I think Trey has said as much. But both of them are very, very smart guys. And what they do is they think this stuff through much more than some other people would. And I think that's true. I still have a hard time with unilaterally criticizing both sides when one of those sides is akin to the rise of fascism in Europe.
I mean, that's just a point that we just aren't going to agree on, because I think you're being a little alarmist about the right.
I hope I am being alarmist.
Yeah.
It didn't bother me as much during the Bush administration. And this movie, certainly, I didn't have a problem with it at the time. Like I said, by the time I got to now, having gone through Trump, and not to say that we're through Trump, because I don't think we are, but I have a much harder time with them equally satirizing Hollywood activists as well as the government.
I mean, I guess the message I'm trying to make here, and it's very controversial, but I think that the explanation for Trump is much more complicated than just everybody lost their minds and became Nazis. I think it's a lot of people who are moderates reacting to the extremism of the left. And that's a whole, I mean, again, this is a whole political discussion that I don't know that we want to get into, but I think it's true that there's a little craziness going on the left that's scaring the pants off of people who are moderate. And that's, when we get into cancel culture, when we get into, defund the police, I think there is a certain amount of the media is losing its mind a little bit. That's including the left. All right. It's both sides. I think the New York Times, I've canceled my subscription several times. I always resubscribe because I need to read them, but I constantly cancel and protest because I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why are you being so biased in your coverage? I think the media has lost its mind.
You told me you joined and canceled 4 times yesterday.
I do that all the time. I also quit the Democratic Party all the time. I'm always writing to Nancy Pelosi, I'm out of here. How could you do this? F you. I'm never. And then I always, because I want to vote Democrat. I always vote Democrat. So I always come back to
quit and show up on Monday morning like George Costanza.
That's kind of my pattern. But I think I'm not the only liberal who's in that situation right now. We're kind of like, what's going on?
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think it's why some people are reacting to South Park and saying now, that they think, Trey is too right for them, or that he's somehow on the right side, which he objectively isn't. And I know that, but there is a certain faction of the left who you can't have nuance. It's not enough for you to simply be liberal. You have to be liberal in exactly the right way. And if you are 1 degree off from the way they expect you to be liberal, you're a Klansman to them.
Yeah.
And you're lumped in with Nazis and white supremacists, and you're no better.
And I don't think people understand how dangerous that is and how much that was an explanation for why we got Trump. So let's get back to...
Let's talk. Okay, well, let's talk about some of the things about South Park that are wonderful, like Tweak. I love Tweak so much. I love this poor coffee-addled kid who is so terrified and nervous and has to stay up all night making hats because they said there was going to be a free hat. And he's freaking out. I relate to his dilemma because I have to do all-nighters to get my work done for the New Yorker. And remember when I was working on my book and I told you I was flipping out and you helped me? I was tweaking in the middle of the night, hopped up on coffee, losing my freaking mind because I got a deadline in the morning. I got to make all these hats for the free hat meeting. And then there's no punch and pie. I love that episode and I love Tweak.
Yeah, Tweak is cute. I'm a Butters person myself.
I love Butters. Well, that was my next thing. Things that are wonderful about South Park, Butters. Once they introduced Butters, I fell so in love with that show because I was Butters. Mm-hmm. I know you were too. I know you. I was the kid in my group of kids who was just a little more naive than the other kids. He acted a little bit younger and was a little more innocent than the other kids. And he was a little more shocked at what the other kids were doing. And he was just kind of clueless about the darkness of the real world. That was me. I was absolutely Butters.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't really Butters. I was always a pessimist, to tell you the truth. I was always a pessimist. Okay. I was Stan a little bit more, although I wasn't a popular kid and I wasn't like the center. He's kind of the center of the group. I wasn't that, but I think I was a little more Stan in just my cynicism. I've been cynical since the day I was born. Unfortunately, it's not fun. I don't like it. I'm not proud of it.
I know, and that's the thing you and I disagree on all the time.
Yeah. No, what broke my heart once was Conan O'Brien once said, because I love Conan O'Brien so much. And once he was like, I hate cynical people. There's one thing I hate, it's cynicism. And I was like, my heart just broke in half because I adore him.
What he said was, for the record, it's my least favorite feature. It's my least favorite emotion. It leads nowhere.
Yeah.
And it leads nowhere. I agree with that. And I remember that speech that Conan made. And my reaction to it was to cheer. And I said, yay, Conan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, I guess was that after 9/11? Was that when he said that?
No, it was when he was forced out of his job by Jay Leno. And he made a message to his fans and said, don't worry about me. Mm-hmm. I'll be fine. And don't be cynical. It leads nowhere.
Yeah.
And he said, you can do amazing things if you just work hard and you keep a positive attitude. You can do amazing things. Amazing things can happen if you're not cynical.
Yeah, I mean, he had pretty much a lot of success, so it was easy for him to say that.
Listen to Conan, Trapper Keeper.
Yes.
I love the Trapper Keeper that somehow mutates and grows into a monster.
It's like Dawson's Creek, right?
Yes, absolutely. You already mentioned it on the Team America show, but my favorite episode of all is the ski lodge episode.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, that has a great title, and I can't remember the title
Aspen,
of it now.
ASSPN.
Aspen, right? Yes, it brings us back around to the beginning of doing the Gandalf thing. Is that they had this wonderful knack for picking pop culture things and just picking them up whole and putting them into their show and putting their characters into them. And they were so good at these parodies, these genre parodies, and they hit the mark of every 80s teen sex comedy movie with the music. And I love Trey's nonsense lyrics version of Take On Me in that episode where he kind of like, and it's perfect. It is pitch perfect. And I love that episode so much. I love that it ends with a reference to Total Recall.
I don't remember actually.
It ends with
the
girl lifting her shirt to show her tits, but it's actually Kuato from Total Recall.
Yeah.
Quaid, start the reactor.
I forgot.
One of the ways they won me over was by being such nerds. They had such a head for these references, these cultural references to the nerdiest stuff in a way that really the Simpsons didn't. In a way that the Simpsons didn't, because the Simpsons cultural references they're about a few years behind. The Simpsons were referencing The Godfather and Citizen Kane every other episode, but they weren't picking stuff out of Star Wars and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
As if those things were canon. Those were the literature canon of South Park. That,
although that was sort of sweet about The Simpsons in the beginning, was that it was very timeless. The Simpsons,
right. It's true. They didn't use too many cultural
They
references.
lost their cherry a little bit when they got way too referencey. And in the beginning, it was just completely timeless. And then actually it's Conan a little bit who started slipping in. Now, it was wonderful that he got in Planet of the Apes and Streetcar Named Desire. Those are two of the best episodes, obviously. Monorail had Star Trek. But then it started little by little becoming more and more contemporary references until it really got kind of sullied, I think, with contemporary. And now I don't watch the show at all. But
yeah, I agree. And South Park started from that place. It was a very modern take on things. And so I loved that. And when I saw the Aspen episode, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. And it includes the montage song. Yeah. That's where the montage song first came from. And it was beauty. It was a thing of beauty, incredible beauty. I still listen to it. It's so great. Yeah. So that's a thing I absolutely love. Although the Simpsons Did It episode is also great.
I actually, it's funny. I'm not crazy about the whole. That's the one where sea monkeys, the sea people, which is like one of my all-time. I mean, I had actually put in that whole segment about Cartman going, Kyle, hold the sign up higher, higher, when they're about to welcome the sea people, when he's about to pour the stuff into the tank. But I got copyright claimed. I had that whole segment up there because it was so funny. That. Yeah, I got copyright claimed, and so I couldn't. It actually blocked. I got blocked for that. So I couldn't include that in the episode, but man, please everybody go, rewatch that episode. But it's, I actually like the Simpsons references less than that silly introduction, which was just the sea people introduction for me.
Now, Susan, the time has come for us to talk about something very serious.
All right.
We have to talk about a little place in Colorado called Casa Bonita.
Yes, I have evidence. So
now let's give a little background on Casa Bonita, please. Yeah.
So now when I was a little kid, like probably third grade, I was probably exactly the age of those kids. Exactly. I was probably 8. We were a skiing family. The only sport I was ever good at in my entire life by a long shot was skiing. I was a hell of a good skier.
I had no idea.
In gym class, I was the last kid picked every time for my entire childhood. But I was really good at skiing. And so we took a family trip when I was really young to Breckenridge, I think, or I forget, but we went skiing in Colorado because that's what you do if you're a skiing family. And we went to Casa Bonita, and I swear to you, I thought it was a dream. Like I thought I just made that up. Like I had this memory that I thought it probably didn't really happen. That's probably something you just, when you're that young, you just imagine it happened. And then when that South Park Casa Bonita episode came out, I was floored. I was like, it was all real. It was all real. And they captured it so perfectly.
And I thought they made the place up.
Yes. And so when you saw it, you thought they made the place up. So Joe and I are part of the Movies by Minute community because I was doing a podcast about The Shining, broken down in 2 minutes and 37 seconds. And Joe was a frequent guest, but also a frequent guest on Star Wars Minute, which we reference all the time. And the Star Wars Minute guys were holding these conferences, these Movies by Minute conferences. A few years ago, they did it in Boulder. And so Joe and I went.
It was Denver.
No, Denver. Yeah, Denver. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, Denver. And so Joe and I went to the conference, and I was like, guess what we have to do? Like, we cannot leave that place. Two things, actually. One,
by that time I had found out that it was a real place, and my mind was blown. I couldn't believe that was a real place. And
I was just building him up for this, obviously. There was 2 things we had to do. One was to visit the actual hotel that was the inspiration for The Shining, which was where Stephen King got his idea. We went there. And then the other thing was go to Casa Bonita. And it's just been in the news, and they just filed for bankruptcy. So we are so lucky. We went.
Wow,
they just filed for bankruptcy. Yeah. So we went to Casa Bonita. Joe bought me this very Cartman right here.
We took pictures of it.
We took pictures of it through the whole, and I'll post some if I can find them. I'll post pictures on this video of our Cartman in Casa Bonita.
I just remember it was a wonderful place. It was like, I love the atmosphere of the place. I have a fetish for indoor places that look like outdoor places. So when you go into Disney and you go into a place that has like little houses and little roofs and a fake sky above, or in Las Vegas, when you walk through the Venetian hotel and it looks like Venice on the inside with a fake sky and a fake sunset and the little fake buildings on either side. That's what Casa Bonita is like inside. There's all these little rooftops and all these little balconies, like you're outside in like a little Mexican village, but it's all indoors. And that just drives me nuts. I love it so much. And all of the things from the South Park episode are there for real.
It's
the cliff divers,
exactly as they
all
portray it.
there.
And it's just as magical
it is just
as they
magical.
portray it.
Yeah. And also there's food. It's a restaurant, and the food is, let's see, how can I put this? Bad, terrible.
It's not terrible, but it's not the best.
I don't remember what I ordered, but what I got was a plate of sodium. It was a plate of pure salt. It's the food is just there as a way to get you to hang out in the place and spend money in the arcade and order margaritas.
Yeah.
And for that,
and
it's
watch
very
the
effective.
gorilla and the
And
gorilla do
watch
the yeah.
the guy in a gorilla suit runs around and the dive, and it's perfect. It was exactly what I wanted.
Well, kid, you made an entire town panic, you lost all your friends, and now you're going to juvenile hall for a week. Was it worth it?
Totally.
We're so lucky we got to do that, because like I said, hopefully maybe somebody will pitch in and get them out of bankruptcy, but they just filed. It was just in the news.
Yeah, it might be
literally within the last couple of weeks.
I don't know. Maybe some massively rich TV writer can keep that place going. I went to see BASEketball in a movie theater.
Like, I had a feeling I had watched it, but then just like last night I was looking at it, I was like, no, I never watched this. And it wasn't very good. I watched like half of it. I was like, okay, I'm done.
I had a very weird experience. I was having a difficult time, and I had to move out of my apartment that morning, having no apartment to move into. And it was 1998. Yeah. Things were tough for me in 1998.
Yeah.
Things were tough for me in 1998. So I had to stay up all night packing. And then the truck came in the morning to take my stuff into a storage box. Mm-hmm. And I locked my stuff up in storage. And then I had been up all night. I was exhausted, and I just had nowhere to go. I walked around New York, and I just was like, okay, now what? Now what do I do? So I called a friend, and my friend said, okay, you can sleep at my house tonight, but not until tonight. So I had nothing to do. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll buy a ticket to this movie and take a nap, which I did. And it was
typical New York thing. Like, yeah.
And it was BASEketball. And I went into BASEketball with the intention of sleeping through most of it, which I think I did. It's hard to really tell when you've nodded off and come back into a movie when that movie is BASEketball. It's really hard to tell if you've missed anything or not. I do remember it not being as bad as I expected it to be. But what I distinctly remember was that because this was 1998 and it was the movie starring Matt and Trey, the audience was primed for something very different from what they got. And there wasn't a full theater. It wasn't that many people. It was me and a handful of people. But they thought they were getting South Park the movie. And so there's a point at which the character Diane Bashar, if that's how you pronounce his name, I think, that sort of little skinny guy who's like their sort of punching bag throughout the movie.
Mm-hmm. Squeak.
Yeah, he's like the Bruno Kirby character. Yeah. He's like the Bruno Kirby character. He's the short guy who's kind of a angry disciplinarian.
And he was in Orgasmo and Cannibal.
Right.
He's
Exactly.
Really he's really good.
And he's done voices on South Park.
He's
a good friend of theirs.
Yeah.
And I think,
actor.
Yeah. And in the movie, they keep calling him a mean nickname. They keep calling him, is it Squeak or something?
It's Squeak, yeah.
They call him Squeak. And at some point he gets angry and says, I have a name. My name is Kenny. And the whole audience laughed.
Because they're like, oh boy, a South Park joke.
Right. Because they thought, because his name is Kenny, that means that they're going to kill him in the movie. They thought this was going to be South Park the movie, which it was decidedly not. Mm-hmm. But it's still not that bad, actually. I've seen it again. It's okay. It's fine.
I watched like half of it. I was like, I'll probably watch the rest of it. Yeah. But I wasn't, and they don't like it. They don't seem to like it too much. It's funny because after we recorded the episode, I started listening to other podcasts covering Team America. And it was kind of surprising that, a lot of the really younger people are down on Team America. And, I think it's because everything is much more offensive to young people now. It's a little hard for them to get into the mindset of this kind of humor without being offended because the culture has changed. So, and I understand that. But a lot of them were like, but BASEketball was great. It's like, you're not really getting their sense of humor if you think BASEketball was like better than Team America.
There's a whole generation of people that think Spaceballs is great.
Right. It's like you're not getting what's special about Mel Brooks, or you're not getting what's special about Trey Matt.
You're not.
So Cannibal, you like Cannibal, right?
I love Cannibal. Yes. Yeah. And everything you said about it was true. The songs are great. It's amazing that they got what they got for the budget they had.
Yeah.
The jokes are good. It's terrific.
And Orgasmo?
I don't remember. I did see Orgasmo in a theater as well.
Oh,
I just
wow.
I don't remember much about it. It was playing in the Village East cinemas on, I think, 3rd Avenue and like 11th Street.
Yeah.
I went to see it during the day by myself, but I remember so little about it.
It's really
at the
good.
time.
It is really good.
Yeah.
It really is. It totally holds up.
I'd like to see it again. The only thing I really remember is it also ends with a big Star Wars gag, which is Jesus showing up like Anakin and Obi-Wan and Yoda at the end of Return of the Jedi as a ghost kind of on the sidelines.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It does. Yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
That's the only part of it I actually remember.
Like a Force ghost. I just want to bring up a few of my favorite things too. The Nambla episode.
Oh yeah, I remember that very well.
The way he navigates material like that, the way Trey Parker navigated man boy love in a way that is absolutely makes sense, and he's making a perfectly excellent statement. But he, how do you do that? Trey Parker's the only person who's ever figured that out, and he did it, But then, even so to me, I love the innocent stuff like Cartman Land, where Cartman inherits $1 million and he buys a amusement park and he doesn't let anybody in. And again, that's a perfect example of just the simple storytelling where this is what I wish really most of the episodes were these very simple stories. They're talking about morality and greed in a way that's just delicious.
It's such a great exploration of the sociopathy of Cartman, because to any normal kid, if they actually got the amusement park all to themselves, they would find out that they're really miserable. And Cartman thrives. He loves it. It's exactly what he wanted.
Yeah. I think it might have been in that Casa Bonita episode where Cartman decides to be a good person because he's trying to convince them that he's a good person. And so he dresses up nice. And they're like, Cartman, dressing up nice does not equal being nice. And he's like, what do you mean?
He doesn't know.
What are you
he has
talking
no
about?
idea.
He literally has no idea.
Can't understand it.
How to be a moral person. He has no idea. And that's really, it really is exactly what people are like that. They really have no conscience and they really have no idea why anybody would be a good person. Oh, the Ginger Kid episode.
It is time that we all admit to ourselves that gingers are vile and disgusting. In conclusion, I will leave you with this. If you think that the ginger problem is not a serious one, think again.
The one where Cartman thinks he's dead. There's this episode where the kids decide to just ignore. He's just such a jerk. He eats all of the skin off of their Kentucky Fried Chicken.
I remember that one. Yes.
This is the best part. And the kids are like, that's it. We're done. We're done with Cartman. So they decide to just ignore him completely. And the only way he understands that is that he must have died, because why would they just not talk to him? He doesn't understand that what he did was so egregious. It was so, painful to them, that was so mean to them that they just would ignore him. And so he just thinks he died. He interprets it as, I must be dead because why would they just be ignoring me like this? And he convinces Butters that he's dead. And then, there's some really moving ones. Like there's one where Wendy is giving a presentation about breast cancer and Cartman's just knocking it. And, in the end, she kind of has a fight with him. And that's one of the ones where, you see, this is Trey Parker kind of growing up, a little bit. You do see as things progress him trying to be a little more an adult, I guess, is the thing. And so lately the episodes have been a lot more complicated. I haven't liked them as much. They've been much, much, much more layered. The whole school faculty has been much more highlighted. Obviously Garrison as Trump and PC Principal and the PC Babies and Strong Woman. And, they've added a lot of characters. And now Randy has a pot farm called Tegrity Farms. And to me, it's just way too much stuff that I wanted to see the kids. I wanted to be stripped back down. I wanted to tear off all these layers and get back to the kids' stories and see another Awesome-O story. It's much more statement stuff now. It's much more about politics and statements and society. But I really miss the pure stories with these kids.
Well, I think after 23 years, you've done every plot line. So, it's the problem The Simpsons ran into. You do end up doing things that are much more complex. There's only so many storylines. So maybe you don't, you've used them all. So maybe you don't have access to the challenges that these characters would organically face because they've already faced them. Also,
they've been experimenting a little bit. There was a couple seasons where they were trying to serialize it a little bit so that every episode flowed into the next episode. And then they clearly regretted that. And they consider that a failed experiment. So that was a lot of when Trump was in office and Garrison was being Trump and a lot of the school stuff going on. And now, of course, they haven't had episodes. They've only had 2 episodes, which I thought were both kind of the COVID and QAnon. Those 2 episodes, they were like hour-long specials.
But I haven't seen those.
Yeah, those are pretty recent. They did put out hour specials because, they just have shut down production like everybody else. I think that it's worth saying that there is a lot of problematic stuff in the South Park universe. I don't want to defend them so much that people are like, how could you not be outraged that they think the word FAG is acceptable? You know what I mean? Or how could you not be upset about this retarded character who's beating up or getting raped? So I don't want to say that. There's a lot of stuff that really disturbs me that they've done. And like I said, there's a little too much testosterone going on often. And that includes some of the recent stuff too. I mean, Trey's definitely grown up and he's definitely mellowed out, but there's still stuff that I think they go way too far. And I'm like, just pull back a little bit. Like when they did that N-word episode, that was a great message. They were making a message about the N-word, but they have Randy kissing Jesse Jackson's ass. And it's like, why do you have to show that? Like, why do you have to go there? Why couldn't you just pull back a little bit so this was a little more acceptable? 22 minutes. So I just want to make sure that people understand that I'm not, giving them a free pass card all the way. But ultimately, I do think that they've been very constructive. Their cultural messages and their political messages, but more than anything, just comedy. They're just so friggin' funny. And
Yeah,
they've brought so much happiness to my life. I'll tell you that.
Somewhere here, I have Chef Aid, which is very, very hard to find. Oh, here it is. There it is.
Ah.
I have Chef Aid, the album, and it's really great, actually.
Their music is just the Christmas episode. That's all music. That is just magic. It's magic.
I love that
the dreidel song, and it is just, who else can do that? I mean, Trey really is a debatably comedy genius in some ways. You have to use the G word if you ever use it for anybody. He's a contender.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree, and I think I want to revisit some of their stuff. I definitely want to revisit the movie because it's been many years since I've seen it. After it came out, I loved it so much. I went to see that movie in the theater, and I loved it so much. And after it came out, I did that thing that you used to be able to do in the 90s. I bought a bootlegged video cassette from someone on the street. For those people who would have a blanket set up in the subway or in the street, and they would sell bootleg video cassettes, which were filmed with a camcorder in the theater.
Because we didn't have that much. There was not many ways to go see these movies to own these movies. You couldn't own these movies, and you didn't have access anytime you wanted to a movie.
Right. And I thought, well, I've already been to see the movie. I've paid to see it 2 or 3 times. I am allowed to buy this thing for $5 off the street. And I've only ever bought 2 of those. And one of them was Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Oh, wow. The other one, that's a shocker, actually.
And the other one was South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. And I watched it every day.
Wow.
For like months, every night. I didn't have cable. So, and there was no internet. So I just would put that on before bed every single night. And I think I memorized it. And I want very much to see it again.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be back very soon. All right. Bye.
I'm so